Thank you so much for coming. My name is Lena Dahlberg. I'm an associate professor in the biology department. I'm going to start by acknowledging that we are here on the ancestral homelands of the Coast Salish people who have lived throughout the San Juan Islands and the North Cascades watershed from time immemorial. I want to offer this acknowledgement to recognize tribal sovereignty and the histories of this land, and to call towards further learning, reflection, and action. Please join me in a few seconds of silence. Thank you. It is an honor to get to introduce Kat King, who's come all the way from the East Coast to speak with us today. This seminar is brought to you by the Biology Department, by the Social Justice and Equity Committee, by the Spratland Grant for Social Justice, by LGBTQ Western, and it's also part of the Queering Research Seminar Series. And before I introduce Kat more fully, I want to bring Langley up here to discuss a little bit more about queering research. And there they are. And they have some words to tell us.
Great, thank you, Lena. Welcome, everyone. My name is LK Langley. I'm the LGBTQ+ director here at Western. I use they, them pronouns, and I just want to tell you a little bit about the Queering Research Series that LGBTQ+ Western and Women, Gender, and Sexuality Studies are doing this year, and then provide a little context for what Kat's going to share with us. So the Queering Research Series, and Vicki Shui is my amazing partner in putting that together, is happening throughout this year, and it's intended to invite folks from across disciplines to be thinking really critically about the ways that critical race theory, queer theory, critical feminist theories, anti-colonial theories can inform our knowledge about research. What is research? Who does research? Who has the authority to be a researcher? And so we have a series of events throughout the year. Kat's talk is right now. You're all here for that. Tomorrow, Emily Thuma is coming to talk about her new book, All Our Trials, Prisons, Policing, and the Feminist Fight to End Violence. That's happening in Academic West 205 at 4 o'clock tomorrow. And then on March 5th, Catriona Sandilands, who is an environmental ecologist who brings a very critical queer theory lens to their ecological work, is coming and giving a talk on March 5th at noon in the Multicultural Center. And they're also going to be giving a talk related to their work in the Salish Sea with Huxley as part of Huxley's seminar series. And then we have a whole bunch of other things next quarter, including something I'm especially excited about, which is called, it's an LGBT outing with the Audubon Society. Let's go birding together. So we're going to go birding in the Arboretum. But let me just spend a very few quick minutes, and there's flyers up there about the Queering Research Series if you want to know more. You can take pictures, it's also all online. Sharing with you a few of my own thoughts about why it's so important that we are bringing people together to hear from Kat today. In our society, cultural and institutional norms and the laws that so often codify those norms are in many ways informed by inaccurate or overly simplistic notions of what is called the biology of sex. Socially and legally, we routinely deploy categories of female and male and imbue those categories with tons of social meaning, while naturalizing the categories and their meaning so profoundly that they're commonly thought to exist before and outside of social intervention. If these categories serve you, our human involvement in the crafting and deployment of sex can often be invisible. And if these categories do not serve you, or if they do not contain you, the ways we interpret sexual difference and reify the male-female binary can be hard to ignore as we move through the world. Some of you have talked with me about the fact that in this 2020 year alone, there are close to 50 bills that we know of in legislatures around the country that would seek to regulate transgender people's safe and equal participation in public life, including things like access to health care, participation in high school athletics, and obtaining accurate identity documents. And many of these bills are predicated explicitly on claims that the biological truth of a person's sex is always neatly binary, easily defined and determinable, and appropriately subject to regulation by the state. What's implied by these bills, and by a lot of the ways that the law regulates sex, and trans people particularly, what's implied but isn't often stated as explicitly is that transgender people are biologically untrue, pathological, or at the very least, that we are less real than biological men and women. I put biological there in quotes intentionally. Our laws and social norms related to sex have real and sometimes devastating consequences for people's lives. And in my mind, if our society predicates the distribution of consequences on biology, on scientific truth, then we must be teaching and thinking and talking about biology of sex in ways that are scientifically accurate and cognizant of the precious lives that inaccuracies can injure. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Lena to introduce Kat and to say that I'm really excited to hear how we can engage in some of that more accurate discourse in our work.
So I first met Kat last summer at the Society for the Advancement of Biology Education Research. It's called SABR. And I was really taken by the way that Kat described the research, but also brought a really different perspective to this sort of narrow field of science. So I was really excited that we were able to partner to bring Kat here. Kat was an undergrad and is now a graduate student at the University of Louisville. And they're a few months away from completing a Ph.D. in evolution, ecology, and behavior.
Thank you.
As an out, I'm just going to read this straight so I don't get it wrong. As an out genderqueer,
please.
I'm going to read it directly from this page. As an out genderqueer polyamorous person in STEM that is also parenting a non-binary, asexual, aromantic teenager, Kat has a unique perspective that informs their research. They work with Linda Fusilier with a traditional biology department, but are one of 3 graduate students in that laboratory currently completing dissertations in biology education topics or biology education research. Kat was a 2019 National Association for Research and Science Teaching SK Able Scholar, and has recently published their first academic publication in Science and Education, entitled "Do Biologists' Conceptions of Science as a Social Epistemology Align with Critical Contextual Empiricism?"
It's wordy.
It's wordy. That's the research that I saw this summer and that really sparked my interest. So, in addition to their publications and awards, Kat advocates within the biology department for educators to update their curricula to be more inclusive of human diversity. And Kat will be leading a workshop on this tomorrow for faculty and staff who are interested. I'm also, just before I forget, if you didn't get one, we have some surveys out here. So as the talk is going, if you have notes you'd like to jot down, and after the talk, if you have any feedback you'd like to give us, we'd really appreciate that. If you didn't get a survey, you can turn to your neighbor and use the QR code on their survey and enter your answers online. All right, thank you so much and welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you all. And another note about QR codes, there is going to be a QR code in my presentation that will take you to a bit more information about some of the topics that I cover, but trust me, you didn't want me to put a 25 statement table on a PowerPoint slide. There's going to be several places where there are enough words already, I promise. So, to be honest, Langley actually gave an excellent introduction to what I'm going to talk about. Background, right? So I specifically really care about health science students. For one, because it's me. Also, because they are the front line of patient-provider interactions. These are the people that we see, especially nursing students, pre-med, dental hygiene. These are the folks that deal with patients. And there have been calls for cultural competencies. These are training tools that allow these individuals in healthcare to relate across cultures with their patients, right? So this is competency in relating to other cultures. So heterosexual doctors need cultural competencies to relate to their LGBT patients because they don't have the same experiences. Now, my personal positionality also really influenced why I wanted to look at this. As a non-binary person existing within academia, I got really, really tired of the textbook telling me that I was abnormal and that I was disordered. Because I'm not. I am exactly the way I'm supposed to be. I am exactly the way I've always been. The textbook is what's wrong, not me. I was not okay with that, and I was especially not okay with being told that I had to teach a binary. That's not reflective of what the actual scientific body of knowledge says. So my personal position led me into this topic. And why? Because this hurt me, right? It's a microaggression, is what it's called, but it doesn't feel micro to me. It just feels like an aggression. It feels like being told that I'm wrong for how I want to live. Because I refuse to conform. To what? To something that people tell me is true. But I don't believe that anything created by humans can be objectively true because it's a human endeavor. That's just not how it works. We are humans. We cannot be perfect. Thus, the knowledge we generate can't be perfect either. Fail to develop normally. What even is normal development? Who gets to decide that? So that's where I'm going to start with why should we care? And this is some of what Langley was saying. LGBT people are at a greater risk of self-harm than their non-LGBT peers. There are really unique pressures that it takes to navigate a society that tells you that you're abnormal. And there are really unique health issues that come from that, right? A non-LGBT person that in an ideal world where healthcare isn't something we're going to talk about, right, can go to the doctor and get treated for cancer. But a transgender person is going to have to confront so many extra barriers to care. Records, names, insurance company, your significant others. All of these things that lend to health disparities in these populations. And if one suicide is happening in the US every 12 minutes, and we know that 92% of transgender people between under the age of 25 have attempted suicide, that's Gen Z, by the way. That's my target demographic. People that were born between 1995 and 2015, approximately. That's who's dying. And Gen Z is like the gayest generation. No, like literally. So many individuals of Gen Z do not identify as straight. And this number is sourced, but I just saw another one that claimed close to 50% of US Gen Z identify as not heterosexual. So half of our students coming in to the classroom aren't normal. They're disordered, according to the textbook. So I have three main questions for my project. The first is, what do undergraduates believe about sex and gender? Kind of straightforward. Turns out that one's really tricky. How do you figure out what people believe? I'll tell you. If we have beliefs, which, okay, that's the hypothesis, right? There is something that people believe, cool. If they have those beliefs, Where are they getting them? What's reinforcing or countering them? And then what can educators do about that? Because that's partly what I care about is, okay, I have committed to being an out queer person in academia. So I care how we change these beliefs that say that I'm abnormal and that I'm disordered. Now, I know this was cross-advertised to women in gender study. So if that is you, I am going to grossly simplify these ideas. Just so you know. Beliefs. There's lots of definitions. I chose one that says that this is a configuration of ideas. This is different from knowledge. Knowledge has an epistemic authority. If you are not familiar with that term, you'll hear it. Don't worry, it's ways of knowing. There is an authority embedded in ways of knowing. Ours is science, right? My textbook's epistemic authority is that of science. It is making a claim and says, because I am a textbook, you should believe me. So, knowledges have an authority to them that gives them weight. Well, I want to look at experience. Because my personal experience has informed so much of what I did. So I needed a framework for that. And I settled on queer theory. Specifically, if you care, it's a little branch called New Materialist Feminism. And it really gets at this idea that you can't separate your mind from your body. So saying that gender is in my mind and sex is in my body, well, but my mind is in my body. What the hell? Right, so I wanted something that emphasized the intra-action between these things. So I selected queer theory. And I really wanted to see how these things interact together. So a lot of times we look at one or the other. How does belief influence knowledge? How does experience influence belief? But you can't separate these things any more than I can take my mind out of my body and still function. That's not how it works. So there are two frameworks. The first is the conventional definition of sex that you have heard in every textbook and probably seen on Facebook from your bigoted relatives. Everybody knows that sex is XX and XY. It's penis and vagina. God, it's science. Duh. You can't argue with science. That's the way it is. It's coded in your genes. That's the conventional definition. And gender, okay, if we're going to talk about gender, then we say this is that social thing. Yeah, totally cultural. That's women in gender studies problem. Over here in biology, we deal with sex. But I can't take my mind out of my body. So how can I say that gender is in my mind but sex isn't? Or how can I say that gender isn't in my body? Then I have my queer theory ideas. That there isn't a line between sex and gender. That's something we made up. We, humans, said these two things are separated. Why? Well, it was political. We want to get super reductive. Because politics. But it was this drive to keep the rational science separate from these feelings about our bodies. I don't agree with that. So this is my framework. There's equal agency. You can't separate sex and gender. Great example, right? So medicine really cares about sex differences. Like the claim that Middle Eastern women, there is a sex difference between Middle Eastern women and Middle Eastern men in their bone density. It's biological because it's sex. It's not. It's because the women have to be covered and have less exposure to sunlight, which affects your bone density. So wait, is this suddenly now a gender difference? Because it's a cultural reason that's written on the body. How do we draw that line and say this is a separate domain? We can't. So that's the background. How did I figure out what my students believe? I gave them a card sorting activity. It's called the Q sort. They had 25 statements that talked about these different parts, these different claims about sex and gender. And I went into pop culture, like common audience textbooks. I went into standard books. I looked at journal articles. And that's where I sourced these statements, these claims. And the QR codes on the next page is going to show you the statements so you can snap it and see what they are. Because I only highlighted a few really important ones for this. And then I recorded an interview where I asked them, why did you pick the thing at +4 and -4? What about the middle? What was unclear? And those were actually really beneficial because they were associated with each person's placement of the cards. And then I use a special program that's free if this is a research topic you're interested in. Easy, low-cost startup, about 40 bucks, research project. Throwing that out there. Plugged it into PQ method, and it gave me numbers. And then I spent the next year figuring out what they meant. Science! So, I ended up with 37 participants. What's really cool about this particular tool is, one, it's mixed method. So it's combining qualitative and quantitative. I get numbers. So the people that are like, if there's not p-values, it's not real. I'm like, all right, I got you. Social scientists, I used grounded theory. Hey, you know what that means. It's okay, the rest of you don't. You don't need to worry about it. Know your t-test. Chi-squared, those are important. Okay? The vast majority of my participants were 18 or 19-year-olds. And I had 21 different majors represented. So this was a very good sampling of the undergraduate population at my university. Here's that QR code. Oh boy, it's a graph. It's not a science presentation without it. What this is showing you, those dots are people that participated in the sort. If they're above this line, they fell into an ideology, a shared approach to sex and gender. And if they're below it, they're in a different one. These are called factors. And all a factor is shared beliefs among a group. What's cool about this approach is that it is designed to get at shared subjectivities. It's not a test of difference. The goal is not to say, how are these two groups different? That's a secondary effect of what I figure out. I can compare them later. But that's never been the goal of this. It's just to say, what do they believe? So there were 25 statements, and each statement is assigned a value based on where people put it on that distribution. +4, -4, and then it's shaped like a pyramid, so you can have the most things in the middle where you're uncertain. And so it's a scale of disagreement to agreement. It's a lot like a Likert scale, but you're forced to make a choice. You can only have one statement you most agree with, and one statement that you least agree with. A total of 18 of my participants described my first factor, factor 1. And I'm going to tell you what each of those things mean in a minute. 14 of them, factor 2. So this was really good. This kept most of my people. And the ones that are in this gray box, these are sorts that were not significant on either one. So they were not part of the analysis. This is a great tool because if someone else took it, used my exact set, they can get entirely different results because a different population can believe different things. It's a very adaptable tool. This is what factor 1, if they could have made the perfect 100% factor 1, setup, this would be it. And I've color-coded it because I like colorful things, if you hadn't noticed from my glasses or my hair. So, red is disagree, like stoplights. I disagree with red lights. Red is bad, or something. So these are the things that these students disagree with. They disagree that there are two sexes. There's more than two human sexes, according to this group. Yes. Awesome! Someone read more than the textbook. But they think that gender and sex are different. Right? So this is more of that conventional separation of domains, mind and body, versus I can't pull my mind out of my body. Agreed, blue. I like blue. It's calming. So the things they agree with. Sex is on a continuum. It's not static and binary. Yes! Awesome! Like I can forgive you not thinking sex and gender are associated if everything else that you say here you stand by. And they do, right? The brain is not male or female. It's a mosaic. Those are labels we put on them, according to this group. So the things we agree with and disagree with help us understand what beliefs were present in this group. And we've called them the continuum conceptualization. Because in the interviews, they repeatedly emphasize this idea that sex traits are on a continuum. And that you can get varying combinations in any person. There's no hard, this is normal, and this isn't. Yes! This is what educators want to see. Because this is reflecting closer to what we believe to be correct within biology. So, here's some ways that I broke those apart, right? This is sex traits on a continuum. Both agreement and disagreement. And related to that is the non-binary. Sex and gender are non-binary. These are the key things that are believed by this group of students. These 18 students. Society acts on the body. What? Who taught them that? It was in psychology. They told me. They didn't learn that in biology. Unfortunately. They should have. But they didn't. Down with gender stereotypes! This group did not like these claims that there were differences in how people feel emotionally. They're like, no, I think, in fact, that men are just as emotional, they just aren't allowed to be. They recognized that culture influences how we act, and they recognize that society acts on the body. But they separated sex and gender into distinct domains. One is social, and one is biological. They are different. Okay? Like I said, I can work with that. They justified these beliefs some really interesting ways. The first and most optimistic to me was educational context. I learned it in class. Oh my God, be still my heart. They said they learned. It wasn't in my class, but that's okay. These weren't my students, in fact. So they would have had very different views if they had been through my class and done this. That would have biased myself. Okay. If then, wow, we have an appeal to logic. That's exciting. I don't, like, your university doesn't have them plastered all over the walls like mine does, but we have the, like, traits of critical thinking and stuff, and it's like, oh, wow, I see those so often that I forget that they exist. But it turns out that the students did notice them, and they recognize and they can use logic to say, if I believe this, then that counters this other claim. I can't support that as a result. but not all my friends are girls. That's a good reason. Personal experience, right? That's why I need to stay in the classroom. Not all my teachers are male and female. That'd be great to get as a response in a few years. Cool. Science says so. I agree with this because that's what I know is scientifically accurate. That one's exciting too. Talk more about that. That's just a social norm. That's not correct. That one was exciting too. Recognizing that this is just something society made up. Wow. Okay. All is not lost. There's hope. Then I got into factor 2. You can notice from the name, guess what they felt? There's XX, and there's XY, there's penis, and there's vagina, and science said so. But if you try to tell me that these gender stereotypes are correct, I'm gonna laugh at you. So, unexpectedly, this group rejected all of these stereotypes about differences between males and females. Differences among people? Oh, hell no. That's made up. Except, we believe there are two sexes. We must classify people as one or the other. Boys and girls are born differently. Anything that they have in common, that's just a fluke. They are biologically different at their core. The most reliable way to tell? Ovaries or testes. I wasn't expecting to have to read a Facebook meme in my research, but here I am. Okay, all right. I can't work with that directly. I can't live with that, but I can work with this. So first, this was the good. They rejected gender stereotypes. Like, that is a step in the right direction. But, okay, there's binary sex. There are essential differences, core differences that are static and innate. And biology determines who you are. Well, shit. Why do they believe that way? I learned it in class, to reject my stereotypes. Psychology class said no, and I believed them because they're an authority. This is a biology-based fact. Here's where I heard it in class. That's just how it works. That's science. Penis, vagina, that's science. Well, yeah, depending on how you look at it. There's a lot of things that are, that's science. I just felt like it. I wish that it had been an appeal to logic. If it's this, then it has to be that. But no, I felt like that was correct. So that's what I agreed with. That that's how we should define sex. Based on my feeling. It's very scientific. Social trust. That's what I have always known. That's why I think boys and girls are different. Because that's what I've always been told is correct. I love this one. This was a male-identified person. No, the man is not more likely to cheat. Why? Because I've been cheated on. All right. Okay. So, rejecting gender stereotypes. Awesome. Sex and gender have domains. That's awesome. Sex and gender are non-binary? Yes! This is factor 1. This is what they believe. Society acts on the body. Yeah! Progress. Ooh, and they used the science terms correctly. Okay, that shouldn't have been something that came up, but here we are, right? Did you know that intersex and transgender are two different things? That's good, they didn't. Well, factor two didn't, the binary group. They, in fact, I don't understand how someone could be born intersex and then change their gender. What? That's nonsense. Those aren't the same thing, right? So this group did use the terms correctly, but they could not articulate the mechanism for why. Why is sex non-binary? Because intersex people. What about them? Science. Duh. Okay. Other group. Strong rejection of stereotypes. Kind of unexpectedly for a group that thinks sex and gender are binary. That sex is this static, innate set of things that cannot be changed about an individual. Something you're born with. And humans have two of them. That is it. Penis, vagina. No in between. Okay. But they use sex and gender interchangeably. Someone could be born as a male for their sex, but I don't know. Then they change their gender. They didn't seem to understand that there is that conventionally, right, there's a distinction. So in a way, they had this really great queer theory, sex and gender are the same thing. It was not because they were reflective of queer theory, it was because they just didn't know what gender was. They'd never been exposed to it in the classroom. The few that had gave pretty stereotypical textbook definitions of gender. All two of them. The rest were same thing as sex. It's what you're born with. They were not sure about terms like intersex and transgender and swapped them out. And they also could not explain to me why. Why is why what makes boys, according to them? Okay, what mechanism? They couldn't tell me about the SRY gene. Good old sorry. A fave. Right? They didn't know. They just blindly accepted that science said so. Oh, this is colorful now. This is so much better than that original one. What are we looking at? The things that the quantitative people care about. Here's the p-values. Told you it was coming. All right. So first of all, I ran these stats in R, and it said that they weren't significant, so R lied to me and broke my heart. And I went to Excel and did it basically by hand, following the 20-minute YouTube video that I watched. And all of a sudden, my numbers were significant. And I did that because one of my advisors went, I think those are significant. I'm doing the math in my head. And that's why you're on my committee. Awesome, because I can't do that. And so he was right. I went and I double checked the way he told me to, and it turns out I'm not going to go figure out where my human error in my R code was. Not worth it. Excel did the job. So if you self-identify as LGBT, you describe sex and gender on a continuum. Significantly. The one person that didn't is this little pink dot that has a blue circle. And what's really neat about this is the closer you are to this line, the closer you are to being able to cross into a different set of beliefs. So yes, this person is in factor 2, the binary set of beliefs. But they are not strongly a part of that group the way this person is. Right? So if you were at a 1, that would be 100% agreement with that set of beliefs. Alright. If you're LGBT, you think that sex and gender are not binary. Duh! If you have had 3 or more years of college, if I could have cherry-picked the trends, this is what I would have chosen. Because wait till you see the next one. Oh, there's the biologists. Shit. They're in factor 2. Okay. Rather than be disheartened, this gets me thinking to my third question. How do we change beliefs? But first I had to think about my second question. Where the hell are they getting this shit? Because I want to change it. So, first of all, my university has a top LGBTQ record. That definitely could have influenced my factor 1, having that non-binary approach, that continuum view. So that's why it's important for other places to take what I've done and run with it, improve on what I've done, and see what beliefs are present in your population. Because all of these things that make us who we are, they intersect. And what makes you unique is different from what makes me unique. And those manifest in these things because we're characterizing beliefs. What does the textbook say? By the way, you're going to get to find out because that's the next level. And then, how do we change it? What can we do in the classroom to make a difference? Because, hey, 12 minutes has probably passed since I started, so that's 1 suicide every 12 minutes, you guys. There's going to be 5 suicides in the hour that I'm going to be talking. That's what we can do to change it. It's challenge. Okay, so what do the textbooks say? I apologize in advance. There's going to be a lot of words on some of these slides because it's a textbook analysis. I looked at text, a lot of it. So I bolded the important parts. Now, I want to bring you back to this because this question really was asking what's happening here under the authority of science knowledge that's causing belief over here. I went on Google, as one does. And this was last year, so obviously 2019. US News, who are the top nursing programs in the United States? I got the top 5. Went online, I found their syllabi, and made sure that they used an anatomy and physiology textbook at the undergrad level. These are the 4 textbooks that I ended up with. So they are, one of which I am told is used here, the Marie Pearson textbook. This one's used by my program, also Duke. All right? But, all right, major publishers. This is McGraw-Hill, Wiley, and Pearson. So these are not some dude published this in his garage. And I have an undergrad researcher that did the vast majority of this, including coming up with this code book. The themes we were looking for: heteronormativity, binary sexes, normatives, male and female norms. And we dug into the text to really see all of these examples we could find of these things. All right, heteronormativity was all over the place. This is literally what I cut it down to. There's not enough room on here. And some of these examples seem on the surface to be a good start. This one here from Tortora actually used the word heterosexual. The only textbook to do it, by the way. This textbook mentioned people having sex with people of the same identity, but they did it in the context of AIDS. So if you're gay, the only time you're mentioned in this textbook is as a risk factor for disease. That's bullshit. The definition of a vagina is based on the penis. Vaginas in textbooks don't exist without the penis as a reference. And females serve the needs of the fetus. That's what your body's for, according to the textbook, which is an authority. Ooh, non-binary, I wish. It wasn't non-binary. It was very binary. In fact, to quote Jesse Bazul, who published back in 2011 an analysis of Canadian high school textbooks, called them straight and naturally sexed. Yeah, that's what A&P textbooks are too. Really straight. Like, if you're not straight, well, maybe you'll get AIDS. But that's the only time we're going to tell you about not being straight. It's assumed that if you are reading that textbook, all you care about is getting a penis into a vagina to make a new person. And by the way, they call a fetus the baby in this book. I didn't highlight that, but like, that stood out to me. The only place in the book where they used that language was in sex determination. So it's a baby when you're picking, were you born under the sign of the penis or the sign of the vagina? If you were born under penis, you should like trucks and outdoors and sports and NASCAR. And if you're born under the sign of vagina, you like dollies and cooking. What? But apparently that's the baby. And if you're a normal female, you have XX. Okay. The male norm. It's really hard to look at the index and see that, according to the index, the male and female discussions are equally represented. But when you look at the actual words, males are mentioned more often in the female section. Females are never mentioned in the male section. And we are not getting equal treatment. Two different textbooks use the same shitty explanation. How come testes get measurements and ovaries are food? What the fuck? And this one really pissed me off. Apparently, female sexual response is essentially the same as males and need not be repeated. Bitch, please. And let's talk about sperm. The torpedoes that pack lightly. Because I want to imagine a sperm cell packing a backpack. And don't forget that you should care about a natural looking breast. If you have breast augmentation, that's only for females. So was breast reduction, by the way. Just didn't have room for all of it. Expectant mothers are apparently the only people who are asked if you're having a boy or a girl. Also, sex and gender are different. Right? Swimming ability. Sperm swimming. Those torpedoes. The powerful release. That's really weird language. They thrash and crawl. Okay, cool. It's a cover. Why are you showing me this? It's for the caption. Boy meets girl, the fuck you say? Also, there should be more than one sperm. That's not how it works. I didn't even put a caption on here. Do you need one? Look at how she's sprawled. He's flexing because he's strong and potent. He's ready to release his powerful torpedoes. She's like, look at my tits. You can't even see my reproductive structures, which is the whole point of the picture. But how will you know that it's a female-bodied person if you don't want to fuck them? Oh, gender norms. I love this one. This one's subtle. It actually is, right? Okay. Standard page out of a textbook. We've all seen something like this. Reference image. But then, I went to the female section. The exact same reference image. I want you to look at her hips versus his. I say again, what the fuck? How did they miss this? Who put these pictures together and thought, you know what makes sense for us to show these reproductive structures? A sexy hip cock. So you don't forget what part of the book you're in? It says female reproduction at the top, okay? You don't need the picture. But these are embedded in these texts. So what's happening here? They're reinforcing binaries, and they are super not inclusive. Really badly not inclusive. Okay. How can we change this? Here's the good news. I already worked this part up. And I haven't finished the data analysis, but what I did is I gave students a case study about intersex people. And then my control group got a case study about testicular torsion or ectopic pregnancy. So traditional topics covered in A&P. Or an intersex person. And I had a pretty good number of folks that were kind enough to want the extra credit for participating in my survey. And what I found was that, well, regardless of what course you're in, including the grad level, one person got all 4 of my multiple choice A&P questions correct. It was not the grad student. That worries me too. It was also no one in pre-med. It was a nursing student who was not straight. Okay, so these were the questions that they were given, which now that you've seen me complain about the textbooks, you should be able to answer at least 2 of these pretty simply. Yeah, so good news. 60%, that is better than random chance, said ovaries are what would happen if you're XX instead of generating testicles. Awesome. Cool. 34% correctly identified the clitoris as the structure that would occur if you don't have a penis. And pretty much random guessing on that one, right? 38% got the correct answer, but 30% got the wrong answer. By the way, all human bodies have both estrogen and testosterone within them. If you hadn't heard that before, now you know. And you can be part of the 38%. And the most worrying to me was that our students do not know where the hell these hormones come from. Well, amino acids seemed like a good guess. It makes things up, right? I recognized it. Okay. I gave them reading questions after the case study, and if they missed the very, very simple reading question that showed that they read it, they were more likely on the open-ended response to say that the sexes are dissimilar. But if they read their article and they had an intersex case study, they're more likely to say that sexes are similar and not different. And they can articulate why, which we didn't see before. They justify it with hormones and gonads and all of these different things that are what we would want them to use. And then, big picture, takeaway. Giving students a single 1,000-word case study to read can change how they view sex in a biological context. So we as educators can use our our authority in the classroom to shift what people believe. And that is powerful. And if there is no other takeaway than that, take that you, as someone who is a biologist, whether you're an educator, whether you're an undergraduate, you are an authority. And what you say matters to people who don't know what you know. So use it. Use your power for good, because you have it. All right, so to summarize really quick, because I see I'm running low on time. These things are all connected. And we cannot, in our textbooks, in our lives, or in our classrooms, try to separate them, because it's not going to work. And at the end of the day, all we have to do is start somewhere. That's every step. Starts with the first one. You all are here for that. So thank you. And with that, I'd like to thank my advisor, Linda, my undergraduate, Harshini here, and then my funding that paid for Harshini to do this awesome work. You all have any questions? Yeah.
I'm curious what controls you used when you were giving out the survey to ensure that this data, given the small sample size, was really something you could count on?
Yeah, so the Q-sort is designed to have small sample sizes. It's built into the tool. So it already accounts for that. And part of the advantage of it is that you're looking at similarities, not differences. For tests of difference, we need big sample sizes. For identifying commonalities, it gives us a whole different way to approach things. And so the control, in effect, is the individual, as they're sorting the cards, has to make value judgments. And that's how we determine what they believe. They placed a value on certain statements.
I guess I'm more wondering, did you mix up the order of the questions? Did you give the survey? Did you give it to students who came to you?
So I did snowball sampling partly, and also some folks got extra credit for participating, right, which is standard in academia. The way it works, I hand them the cards, and I literally just sit there while they read them, sort them into agree, disagree, neutral, and then put them on the distribution. And then they tell me why they chose what they chose. So it's ultimately fully guided by the individual that's participating. See another? Yeah.
So you mentioned a 1,000-word case study. Which was that?
All 4 of my case studies were 1,000 words, plus or minus 15 words. So they were all within that range of one another. The titles were standardized so that between the control and treatment, they looked the same, they were formatted the same. The only difference was, did it talk about intersex, or did it talk about ectopic pregnancy or testicular torsion?
I guess really it's is there any way for us to access those?
There will be. I am actually going to be sending it to some folks, and ultimately it will be published as effectively a module that can be taken and incorporated into classes. But I created these case studies, so 3 of them are based on actual case studies that I modified, and 1 I couldn't find what I wanted, so I made it. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Oh, yeah.
I have 2 questions, but I'll only ask one right now in the interest of time. When you showed the factors and you were identifying, or you were showing the identities of the folks,
Yes.
was there any intersection between those? So were all the pre-health people did not identify as queer?
The only person, let me actually go back, way back into the way back, past all my cool animations. Okay, it wasn't getting on here. Yeah. Okay, so the only person that I had overlap on is this LGBT pre-healthcare person who was getting really close to moving over into the next factor. Yeah.
So
great slide to throw up here because I have a question about the education. And so the longer students are in college, they start to load onto a different factor. Where are these beliefs laid down, right? Could this, if you did this in middle school or high school, would you expect the students to have more, like all kind of load onto one axis, and then as they go to college, they start to learn more and different perspectives, and that's what's pulling students towards factor one?
You know, that's entirely possible. First of all, the language from my statements is not targeted outside of like college student level. So I'd have to modify that. But yeah, I think it would be very dependent on their personal experiences and their educational experiences, right? Those same epistemic justifications that both groups had, social norms, just trust and authority, those are going to play in regardless of where you are in your life history, because we all are subjected to those same influences. Whether or not like a middle schooler is going to say sex and gender are non-binary is going to depend on what they've been learning up to that point. And so that's why we have this, I think we have this difference, is something over here, and these students, the black ones are non-biologists, right? So there's still non-biologists over here saying it's binary. But it's worrying when we know that these are people that are going into the health science fields and they're saying it's binary, and that's not reflected. And one thing I noticed from the educational intervention was all of the people that referenced the case study in their explanation for why the sexes are more similar, none of them were biology people. Business major and a marketing major. So we can change non-biologists' beliefs too, which is like, all right, crazy hair, I'm coming for you on Facebook.
Let's take 2 more questions, and then in the interest of getting people to pizza, we'll do that.
Yeah.
But I see one over there.
Yeah.
I was just wondering, with your healthcare students, were there ones that were more than 3 years, or are these like freshmen who are like, I'm going to be a doctor?
I'm actually, so no, there's no color overlap on those. And yeah, there is a little bit of that. Obviously, when someone's like, I'm in intro bio and I'm going to go to med school, be critical of that claim, like you should be critical of many claims made within the classroom. Right? So no, I don't have anyone that's on that trajectory in this study. I do have pre-med in the educational intervention, and what I saw, sadly, is that regardless of where you were academically, there's no language difference on like the quality of your explanation.
Student question right here.
Yeah.
So, I guess for like a piece of advice for all of us, how do you tackle that crazy aunt on Facebook?
Okay, so I actually have a document saved on my devices. It's on a cloud, and I literally just copy paste, and I have this statement that's written up about sex and biology, and it's basically what I consider to be my conversation killer, because I don't go in to argue with them. I go in and I say, this is not correct. Here are sources. Educate yourself. And when presented with information, they will shut down. Just like the student that was like, oh God, 1,000 words, I'm done. Guessing, they're dissimilar. So it's steps, and it's just being consistent and also not being aggressive, which is really hard for me because I'm like, someone's wrong on the internet, I must go. And I want to crusade and like tilt at that windmill all day. But really it's just introduce an idea and give them time. Because all of these things, everything I learned, took me time to process it. Including this, including my own lived experiences. That's literally why we have therapy, to process. So like give them the time and give them the tools, and then try to be respectful that yes, we know they're backwards. We know they're bigots. they will not change if we call them that. So just being aware of that. And yeah, I may not agree with what they believe, but I respect their right to believe it. That is their choice. And they should, by God, respect my right to be who I want to be. And if they don't, then we cross that line when we get to it.
So thank you so much for if you wrote down, I expect lots of comments, by the way. If you have comments, we'd like to collect them, we can place them on the table. Wait, just a minute. If you are interested in asking Kat some more questions, we're going to have pizza upstairs in biology 415. You are all welcome. You might not all fit.
And I brought the Q
And we
sword.
have the Q-sword. You can go do it.
If you want to do a Q sword, you can. I brought everything with me.
All right, thank you so much. And thank you, Kat.
Make your hands electronic, so please, and thank you. Really
We actually talked to the publishers there. Definitely called a particular book at a presentation and found herself in the elevator writing an author. And that's where she found out that it was all also, the wife was like, no, I agree that. So it was this very like heteronormative orangutan family, like nuclear family type of thing. She's like, what is this? There is reception for like depending on the and so yeah, my point is to get this into a journal, get it out there in the community, and then use that as a platform to go to publishers and say, exactly, and it is essentially like that. Having it in Oxford and it's obvious in a lot of places. To me, if you're just skimming through trying to learn things, you're memorizing structures, not looking at the fact that that image is so simple. It's saying that if you have this trait, you don't stand square. And there's other things.
Right?
Yeah, really good at yeah, that's not it. Exactly. And one book, it's so funny, I mentioned teachers and authors, but the one textbook that has a black male co-author. I was looking for the first chapter where they do sort of the introductory systems, and the images were all different ethnicities and not even the family become the only textbook that had a black author had that. So it's what you were saying. What if you got a queer person as a co-author? Yeah. So it's there's hope in it, but it's a slow. Everything in academia is slow. And that's just, and I'm from Kentucky, so even if I get a change that like you guys have, we won't see it for 20 years.
Yeah, she seems like an introvert.
Yeah, but if you you can fund your.
Okay, you're right, and that's, you know what, that's a good point, and I hate being within the capitalist society, but I would totally use it to my advantage. Yeah, it's like,
Big textbooks, you're talking 6 figures each.
right, you know, my sister-in-law works for Pearson, so she's just, like, I say, yeah, that'd be awesome.
I need to take the camera down.
What do you want? I can do it.
Really? Oh my gosh, I'll give you a high five. You're a good one. I gotta go pick up my camera.
Yep, yeah, no problem. Again, I do tomorrow, so take care of that.
Awesome.
Probably not. Yes, we have to go up.
I'm excited.
I mean, that's what it says. I know.
think so.
Yeah.
You have everything you need out of here? So, Ben, you're here.
Yeah.
Don't bring it.
What, Lena, am I doing anything special with it?
So are you taking that?
She just asked me to take it down, so I'll take it down. But I don't know where it goes down to.
I don't know either. The student who set it up said something to me, but it was while
All that
Langley
was,
was doing the intro.
yep, all that was
I
recorded.
didn't understand what you were saying because I'm old and I can't process multiple sounds.